There's an old saying, lightning never strikes twice. But as with many things in life, some people are less lucky than others. And today we will look at one of these people, a man who was struck by lightning not once, not twice, but 7 times during the duration of his life. But how did this all happen, and what is the story behind the man whose nickname became the human lightning conductor? Welcome back everybody, my name is DocFeedy. I'm a MD who likes to talk about cases and true stories, mostly with a medical touch, that people such as you and I have suffered through. So if you like what I do, stick around to see more, and with that out of the way, let's dive into this case. Roy Cleveland Sullivan was an American man who was born on February 7, 1912 in Greene County, Virginia. He was one of 11 children growing up near Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. He reportedly never graduated high school, preferring to spend his time outdoors, a passion that he would later make into a profession, as he became a United States Park Ranger in 1936, up until his retirement. He was patrolling in keeping peace in Shenandoah National Park, a small 170-kilometer-long piece of nature near the Blue Ridge Mountains, encompassing the popular panorama route called the Skyline Drive, a route that Roy actually helped to build as a construction worker in his younger years. And it was during his 36 years on the job in Shenandoah National Park that Roy Sullivan would supposedly end up being hit by lightning a total of 7 times. But before we go further into this story, let's look at the math. How likely are you to be struck by lightning? Lightning is an electrical discharge, an enormous spark resulting from a difference in electrostatic tension between the cloud and a neighboring surface. Calculations slightly differ, but the lifetime risk of being hit by lightning ranges from 1 to 10,000 to 1 to 15,000, with a yearly risk of 1 to 1,222,000. According to the National Weather Service (NWS), 43 lightning-induced fatalities have been recorded from 1989 to 2018. Lightning strikes are a major factor of storm-related deaths in the US, albeit only 10% of those hit by lightning die. 90% of people survive with various degrees of disability. But what actually happens when lightning strikes your body? First of all, the obvious: electric current. Lightning strikes can lead to a disruption in the complex electric transmission within the heart, with cardiac arrest being the most common cause of death in lightning strikes. Equally as sensitive is the brain, with symptoms similar to sequelae of stroke. Thinking, speech, motor and sensory functions can all be affected, resulting in permanent disability, seizures, and brain death. Secondly, heat. Lightning can cause immense heat in its immediate surroundings, up until 27,000 degrees Celsius or 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This can result in major burns and scarring, which is not only painful, but can also lead to skin infections and to sepsis. The resulting scarring can resemble fern-like shapes, known as Lichtenberg figures. But it can also open the door for significant loss of proteins and water throughout the skin. This can lead to hypovolemic shock, as the circulatory load of fluids inside the blood vessels is not enough to maintain proper organ circulation, ultimately ending up in multi-organ failure, systematic inflammation, and death. These are major reasons as to why burn victims need specialized care, even after initial surgery, since there are many opportunities for them to become critical, even once the burns have been surgically treated. With that being said, what damages did Roy C. Sullivan suffer from his encounters with the gods of lightning and thunder? Luckily for us, all 7 incidents have been documented by Roy himself. They all occurred between 1942 and 1977 in Shenandoah National Park. During the first strike in 1942, Roy Sullivan found himself on a fire tower in the Miller's Head overlook in the national park when he was surprised by a thunderstorm. By his own account, lightning started hitting the high structure several times, setting it on fire since it had no lightning rod. The park ranger quickly evacuated the tower and tried to get away on foot, but got struck by lightning almost immediately after leaving the tower. This caused him to suffer a half-inch burn along his leg where the lightning entered. It exited his toe, where it left a hole, leading him to lose his big toe and to fill his shoe with blood. This first incident already sparked local attention, but it would not be the last time. Roy was then seemingly free from the sky's anger up until 1969, 27 years later, when the occurrences of lightning strikes started to rapidly accumulate in a short amount of time. Apparently, the second lightning struck him while he was driving in his truck, burning his hair, charring his watch, and leaving him unconscious, possibly due to a seizure or a syncope, which is a medical term for a short loss of consciousness, probably in this case due to a momentary disruption in heart activity. His truck kept on going with him passed out at the steering wheel, supposedly and luckily stopping before rolling off a cliff nearby. Luckily for him, this lightning strike did not cost him his life, but it did cost him some hair and his eyebrows. In 1970, so just a year later, the third lightning strike occurred, while he wasn't even on duty. Roy Sullivan recalls being in his own garden, next to his trailer home, when lightning struck a power transformer first, and then him, who stood nearby, inducing burns on his left shoulder. The lightning had seemingly followed him home, especially since now it seemed that his own family wasn't even safe, when Sullivan later said that his wife Patricia was hit by lightning as well, just a month later, in the same garden. Lightning strike number 4 occurred in 1972, with Roy being on duty again. He said that he was working in his ranger station when lightning suddenly set his hair ablaze again, which he had to cool with water immediately. After losing some of his hair again, Roy would state that this was the moment that he started to carry a can of water with him everywhere he went. Lightning strike number 5 occurred a year later in 1973, when Roy Sullivan saw a storm approaching from afar. Roy, probably having possibly learned a lesson or two about being outside during a thunderstorm, tried to outrun it this time with his car, and when the sky cleared around him, he thought himself finally the victor. Roy then got out of his vehicle, when, despite his efforts, the 5th lightning allegedly struck him several feet away from his car. The lightning had also won this round, and not to be outdone, a similar thing happened for lightning strike number 6 in 1975, 2 years later, where Roy also unsuccessfully tried to outrun an oncoming thunderstorm that ended up hitting him in the ankle in the end. By this point, some of his more superstitious colleagues had already started to keep their distance from him. Roy recalled being on patrol with a supervisor when both saw a lightning strike from afar. The supervisor, according to Roy, very politely but also very quickly said, "See you later," and left Roy's side very swiftly. Finally, at the age of 64 in 1976, Roy retired to live out his days as a senior citizen in a small trailer home, choosing a small community in Virginia to settle. The name of this community was Dooms. And at this point, all seriousness aside for a second, one really has to wonder if Roy C. Sullivan was just clueless, or if he had a purposefully weird sense of humor about his life. Well, Roy, being reasonably suspicious, even after retiring, fortified his trailer home with copper wire and put lightning rods on his TV antenna, electricity meter, and the trees surrounding his property. But at last, the 7th and final lightning strike occurred June 25th, 1977, another 2 years after his last injury and after his retirement. According to Roy, he was fishing in the Shenandoah National Park when the last lightning once again set his hair on fire, but this time it also left him with burns on his stomach and chest, needing him to see a doctor. Roy, being alone outside, staggered back to the car with the fish that he had caught, only to be apparently met with a black bear face to face. First came the lightning, and then the bear, who wanted his fish, according to Roy. But he managed to scare the animal away and drove himself to a hospital, where his injuries were recorded for one last time. Now, let's consider the odds again. If one's lifetime risk is of 1 to 10,000 to 1 to 15,000, how did Roy Sullivan get hit and let alone survive 7 lightning strikes? Given the extraordinary nature of this story, one must also consider that Roy Sullivan worked outdoors, and not only that he worked in the wilderness without any possible protection from tall buildings or lightning rods. Additionally, Virginia is also known to have proportionally more storm days than other US states. Still, for Roy C. Sullivan to be hit by lightning 7 times in his life, his odds have been calculated to be 1 in 16 quadrillion. That is 24 zeros in total. In comparison, your odds of winning the current lottery stakes is 4 to 10 million times better. So maybe Roy also should have gambled some more. But with these odds, Roy Sullivan had earned himself the title of the human electrical conductor and a space in the Guinness Book of World Records in 1972, just after his 4th lightning strike. Surviving one lightning strike can leave you permanently disabled, but Roy survived 7, and with comparably minimal injuries at that. Guardian author Beth Peterson recounts it after being struck twice, that she was clinically dead once, and ended up with a fused jaw and being wheelchair bound, with her losing all of her toes. A significant point of general critique with regards to Roy Sullivan's story is the bizarre fact that a man can be struck by lightning several times in the head, leaving his hair burned, but not damaging sensitive tissues such as eyes, facial features, or the brain itself. More so, other than the injuries themselves, which could be in the realm of possibility of his day-to-day work, all of the 7 accounts listed prior have not been corroborated by immediate eyewitnesses. Still, the attention and myth around Roy C. Sullivan, the human electrical conductor, persisted for decades up until now in the media. Upon being interviewed once, Roy said, "I have never been a fearful man, but when I hear it thunder now, I feel a little shaky." A particular story I personally found suspicious was a childhood occurrence Roy told interviewers about. Apparently, his supposed affinity for lightning, or rather, the lightning's affinity for him, already showed itself in his childhood. In this story, young Roy recalled being outside with his father in the fields, cutting wheat. When a lightning storm approached, Roy said that a bolt of lightning had sprung from the sky, hit the blades of his scythe, and passed through it. It then got to the ground, where it quickly set the entire field on fire. But once again, Roy appeared not to be hurt. Some sources claim that this was actually the first lightning strike Roy Sullivan had suffered, making him the victim of 8 strikes in total. But since this story could not be verified by official or medical records, it is generally not counted within the catalog of his lightning strikes. So when I first stumbled upon this childhood story, I couldn't help to think to myself about the almost epically fatalist aspect of it. It appears almost biblical. It makes me wonder about how much of Roy's story has been embellished, be it by his own account or others, to make it seem more amazing. Other aspects of his story appear just as suspicious, and almost bordering slapstick, such as the lightning strike that hit his wife Patricia a month after the 3rd strike, or the fact that he lost consciousness in a moving car without causing an accident, or the bear who tried to attack him just after his last lightning strike. Those are some of the details that make his story just a little too incredible. Still, park records, medical reports, and the injuries themselves remain as counterproof that Roy Sullivan did actually suffer all of the 7 lightning strikes that ultimately made him famous. A fame that persists to this day, even after his death. Roy Sullivan died on September 28th in 1983 at the age of 71, and to say that the circumstances of his death were just as suspicious as some of the details mentioned prior is an understatement. Supposedly, Roy had ended his own life by gunshot to the head. He had apparently put a .22 caliber handgun on his temple and pulled the trigger. All that while seemingly in bed next to his wife Patricia, of whom he was 30 years her senior. Patricia, who has been described as a heavy sleeper by others, allegedly only noticed her dead husband several hours later. More interestingly, the .22 caliber handgun was in her name as well. Media reports at the time rightly questioned the veracity of Patricia Sullivan's claims, with rumors circulating about bad blood between the spouses, or depression being involved. Given the absurdity of all the prior stories I've told you about, Roy's death seems even more strange. But officially, no murder investigation was ever opened into his passing. His late wife Patricia, his 4th wife, one might add, died in 2002, 19 years later, and was buried next to him in the Edgewood Cemetery in a locality called Grottoes in Virginia. Roy C. Sullivan's grave inscription reads, "We loved you, but God loved you more." A statement morbidly ironic given his track record with Mother Nature. But Roy himself, of devout Baptist faith, said this after his 5th lightning strike in 1973. "God spared me for some good purpose. It's between God and me, and nobody but us will ever know." And so this is where the incredible story of Roy C. Sullivan, the man chased by lightning, ends. And this is also the part where I will leave you, however, not without some final questions. Do you think that the events described prior are 100% true? Do you truly believe that Roy Sullivan defied all mathematical odds of not only getting struck by lightning once, not twice, but 7 times, and also survived all of those encounters? And lastly, do you think that the circumstances of his passing are such as commonly reported? That is all for today. This has been DocFeedy. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.